I was sitting quietly at the banquet table, right next to my 6-year-old grandson Mikey, at the reception of my son's second wedding. The elegant hall of the estate was illuminated by the warm light of candles, laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. Everything seemed perfect, a new beginning for my son after years of sadness. Suddenly, little Mikey squeezed my hand tightly and whispered to me, "Grandpa, I want to leave right now." I looked down, worried by the trembling in his voice. "What is wrong, buddy?" Trembling, he replied, "Grandpa, you haven't looked under the table, have you?" Slowly, I crouched down and looked under the spotless white tablecloth. I froze. I took my grandson's hand and we stood up in silence. If you are watching this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, William's Revenge Stories, and tell me in the comments where you are watching my story from. I want to know how far it has reached. My name is Robert, and the story I'm about to share changed my family forever. Some details have been modified to protect identities, but the painful truth remains. It was a beautiful September afternoon in a quiet Midwestern town. The wedding venue, an elegant historic estate on the outskirts of the city, was decorated with stunning floral arrangements of white roses and lilies, with colored lights shining like stars. I was sitting at table number 8 with my grandson Mikey, watching him push his toy car back and forth on the white tablecloth. His transparent brown eyes seemed immersed in a world of their own, where the noise of the adults around him did not exist. I looked at him, and my heart softened. Carefully, I adjusted the small bow tie on his shirt collar, a gesture as gentle as if I were caressing the memories of his mother, Grace, whose tender smile I still remember as if it were yesterday. The soft music of the live band filled the place, mingling with the murmur of conversations and the clinking of wine glasses. The hall was decorated with impressive arrangements of white and red roses on every table, and the candlelight reflected on the gleaming silver plates. I looked up, searching for my son. David was busy going from table to table, making toasts to thank the guests with a radiant smile that seemed to want to hide the emptiness I knew he still carried in his heart. His new bride, Vanessa, dazzling in her wedding dress embroidered with bright beads and delicate lace, was posing for photos with her friends. Her smile was perfect, without a single cloud, as if the whole world belonged to her. I looked at her, and I felt something strange in my chest, an unease I could not explain, but I tried to ignore it, telling myself that I was just being overprotective. The waiters moved agilely between the tables, serving more whiskey and wine, clearing empty plates of roast beef and potatoes, and arranging embroidered napkins. An elderly couple sitting at our table turned to me with a kind smile. "Mikey is growing up so fast, isn't he, Robert? How old is he now?" the lady asked. I smiled and replied softly, "He just turned 6. Time flies, doesn't it?" Then I turned to cut a piece of the cream cake to give to Mikey. The boy looked up, his eyes shining with gratitude, but immediately lowered his head again and continued pushing his car, as if that toy were the only place where he felt safe. Suddenly Mikey stopped. His small hands froze over the toy car, and his round eyes looked at me with a seriousness that was not normal for him. I felt a chill run down my spine. A bad feeling invaded me. He grabbed my hand tightly. His little fingers were freezing. With an urgent voice, he whispered, "Grandpa, I want to leave right now." His voice trembled as if he were holding back a fear he could not explain. My heart raced. I leaned towards him and put a hand on his shoulder. "What is wrong, son? Tell me what is happening." He shuddered, pressing his lips together, and then whispered so low that I had to bring my ear close to hear him. "Grandpa, you haven't looked under the table, have you?" His words were like a cold knife, piercing my chest. A terrible anguish began to grow inside me, making it difficult for me to breathe. I tried to stay calm and stroked his jet-black hair, but his look, the look of a child of barely 6 years filled with panic, stopped me from ignoring it. "It is okay, my love. "Let Grandpa see," I told him, trying to make my voice sound calm to reassure him, although I myself felt my heart beating rapidly. Carefully, I lifted the edge of the white tablecloth and looked into the dark space under the table, where the wooden legs of the chairs and Mikey's little shoes, swaying nervously, could be seen. And then I saw it. A small piece of paper folded in four, lying there right next to Mikey's chair. It was so small that it almost got lost in the darkness, but its presence froze my blood. Mikey curled up against me, his little hand clutching my arm as if seeking refuge. I felt his agitated breathing. Every tremor seemed to tell me that something was very wrong. I crouched down completely, and with a trembling hand, I picked up the paper. The people around us continued laughing and toasting, but in that instant, my entire world shrank until only I, Mikey, and that damned paper in my hand remained. I unfolded it. The dim light of the candle on the table was enough to read the scribbled words. Table 8. Special guest. Boy. Add extra crushed peanuts to the dessert. A few words, but they were like a direct punch to my heart. I felt the blood freeze in my veins and the air got stuck in my chest. Mikey is severely allergic to peanuts, something my whole family knows perfectly well. A single trace would be enough to put him in mortal danger. Who could have written this? Who could be so cruel? Right on the day of my son's wedding, I squeezed Mikey's hand, feeling his little fingers tremble inside mine. I stood up suddenly, not caring about the surprised looks of the people at our table. The elderly couple stopped talking and looked at me with concern. I hugged Mikey with all my strength, as if I feared that if I let him go, he would disappear. The laughter and music continued to play, but for me, everything had turned into a heavy and suffocating silence. Memories of other times invaded me, taking me out of that glittering wedding hall back to the years when our family was complete. I once thought my son's home would always be full of laughter, but life, like a sudden storm, blew out that flame of happiness, leaving us with scars that would never heal. I remember Grace, my daughter-in-law, like I remember the morning sunlight filtering through the window at dawn. Her smile was tender and warm. She always made me feel as if I had gained a daughter, not just a daughter-in-law. Grace never raised her voice, never did anything that worried me. She was one of those people who just by looking at them made you feel at peace. I still remember those windy afternoons in the suburbs, when I visited David in Grace's cozy house. Mikey's laughter, who was barely learning to walk, echoed in the backyard while he chased a bright-colored ball. Grace would be on the porch with a basket of freshly cut vegetables from her small garden, smiling as she watched her son. "Robert, try the stew I made. Tell me what you think," she would often tell me with a voice full of pride while placing the steaming plate in front of me. I would sit there eating and chatting with her about simple things, while Mikey crawled on the floor, grabbing that same toy car he still loves today. But the most beautiful memory, and also the most painful, is the night Mikey got seriously sick. He had a severe allergic reaction after accidentally eating a cookie with peanuts at a neighbor's house. His little body was swollen, struggling to breathe. Grace held him while tears rolled silently down her cheeks as we rushed to the emergency room. "Robert, I'm so scared," she whispered with a trembling voice in the hospital waiting room after the doctors took Mikey away. I sat next to him, holding her hand, trying to calm her. "Do not worry, dear. The boy is strong. He is going to be fine." But inside, the worry weighed on me like a stone. I stayed awake with Grace until dawn, when the doctors finally told us that Mikey was stable and would recover completely. Grace turned to look at me with red eyes, but with a weak smile. "Thank you, Robert. Without you, I do not know what I would have done." I just took her hand and squeezed it tight, wanting to tell her that I would always be there for her and Mikey. I thought that small family would be happy forever, like a song that never ends. But then one fateful afternoon 2 years ago, everything collapsed. The phone rang while I was washing the dishes in my kitchen. The cold voice of a police officer was heard on the other end of the line. "Mr. Robertson, we regret to inform you that there has been an accident." I do not remember how I finished listening to the sentence. I only know that my hands shook so much that I dropped a plate on the floor, and it shattered. Grace had died instantly when a truck that lost control crashed into her car on the highway outside the city. I stood there paralyzed, feeling the world crumble before me. Grace's funeral was on a day of torrential rain. The drops fell ceaselessly, as if the sky was also crying for her. Mikey, who was only 4 years old at the time, was in my arms, confused, looking at everyone with his innocent eyes, without understanding what was happening. "Grandpa, where is my mommy?" he asked me with his little voice. I hugged him tight, swallowing my tears, and whispered to him, "Your mommy is in a very beautiful place now, buddy." But inside, I felt destroyed. David, my son, collapsed in front of the coffin. His shoulders shook, and he could not say a word. I knew he was trying to be strong, but his look was empty, as if a part of his soul had gone with Grace. After that tragedy, David changed completely. He buried himself in work, leaving the house very early and not returning until Mikey was already asleep. I understood he was running away, trying to fill that immense void in his heart with endless days of work. But Mikey, my poor boy, was the one who suffered the most. He began to speak less. His look was often sad, as if he were waiting for a miracle that would bring his mother back. I became his main caregiver. I took him to school every morning and sat by his bed every night to tuck him in. "Grandpa, tell me a story about my mom." He would ask me often before falling asleep, and I would tell them with a broken voice, talking about how Grace sang to him so he would sleep, how she cut fruit into little pieces to make his favorite snack, how she taught him to know the birds in his backyard. Every story was an attempt to keep Grace's image alive in Mikey's mind and also in my heart. Rose, David's younger sister, also became an essential support during those days. She, with her warm heart and infinite patience, often came to the house bringing coloring books or homemade cookies for Mikey. Rose loved her nephew as if he were her own son. She carried him, read him stories, or sat for hours with him at the table, helping him with his drawings. "Look, Mikey, your drawing is even better than mine," she would say, laughing with her voice clear like little bells. But sometimes I caught Rose looking at David when he entered the house silently after a long day of work. It was a deep look that contained something more than simple sisterly affection. I saw it, but I decided not to say anything. Maybe I was afraid that if I mentioned it, I would interrupt the fragile stability of what remained of our family. David's home gradually became a place without laughter. But thanks to Rose and Mikey, the flame of family love continued to burn, although faintly. I did everything possible so that flame would not go out. But deep in my heart, I knew that both David and I lived with wounds that had never healed. Every time I saw Mikey sleeping, I saw Grace's features in his little face, and my heart ached again. The memory of the afternoon when everything began to change remains as clear in my mind as if time had not passed. I was sitting in my small living room, listening to the sparrows singing in the yard, with my heart full of mixed feelings. It was the first time David brought Vanessa home to introduce her to the family. I tried to open my heart. I tried to see that woman with the eyes of a father who wants his son to find happiness again after so much pain. But deep down, I could not get rid of a feeling of unease, like a cold wind that made me shiver. That afternoon, David arrived later than usual. I was in the kitchen preparing Mikey's favorite chili when I heard the door open. David entered with a strange glow on his face. His eyes lit up like in his youth, when he spoke to me about Grace with a passion he could not hide. "Dad," he said with an excited voice, leaning on the doorframe, "I want you to meet someone." I left what I was doing and looked at him, feeling a bit of nervousness. "Someone special?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. David smiled, a smile I had not seen on him for a long time. "Yes, you are going to like her a lot," he said, full of confidence. I nodded. I wiped my hands on my apron, trying to hide the worry that was beginning to grow in me. After Grace, I was not sure that anyone could fill the void she left. Not only for David, but also for Mikey. And for me. That night, Vanessa appeared. She entered my house wearing an elegant sky blue dress. Her hair was perfectly styled, in waves that framed her face, and her lips painted a soft red that curved into a smile. That smile, I must admit, was charming, as if she had rehearsed it to please anyone. "Nice to meet you, Robert," she said with a sweet voice, tilting her head slightly. I returned the smile, invited her in, and served her a cup of coffee with cinnamon. "How cozy your house is," Vanessa said, while her eyes scanned the family photos hanging on the wall where there was one of Grace, hugging a very small Mikey. I nodded and thanked her, but her eyes stopped on that photo longer than I would have liked, and I was not sure I felt comfortable with that. Dinner passed in an atmosphere that I tried to make as friendly as possible. I put on the table the dishes I had prepared all afternoon, the chili, roast chicken, and a fresh salad, Mikey's favorite combination. David sat next to Vanessa without taking his eyes off her. Happiness was noticeable in every gesture. "Dad, Vanessa is a marketing director at a major company downtown. She is brilliant at what she does," he said with a voice full of pride. Vanessa smiled. She tasted the chili I had served her, with a delicate but calculated movement. "Robert, this is delicious. You have to teach me how to make it," she said, giving me a friendly look. I smiled and replied with courtesy, but a small part of me remained uneasy. There was something in her way of speaking, in her way of laughing, that made me feel like I was watching a very well-rehearsed performance. Mikey, my grandson, was sitting at the end of the table, strangely quiet. He, who normally did not stop telling stories about school, that night only picked at his food without lifting his head once. I noticed he avoided Vanessa's gaze as if trying to hide in a safe corner. Vanessa leaned in, took a chocolate bar out of her bag, and put it in front of him. "This is for you, Mikey. It is very tasty," she said with a voice as sweet as honey. But Mikey remained motionless, his little hands gripping the fork, and then he simply turned his face away without touching the chocolate. I saw a flash of fear in his eyes and felt my heart sink. David frowned, about to scold his son. "Mikey, what is wrong with you? Vanessa is giving you a treat," I intervened quickly. "Nothing is wrong. He's probably just a little tired. Leave him alone, son." David sighed, but said nothing more, and turned to pour more wine for Vanessa, as if trying to cheer up the mood. Rose, who was also at the dinner, sat across from me, eating in silence, but I noticed how her expression darkened when Vanessa took David's hand under the table. Rose has always been protective of her brother and nephew. When Vanessa took David's hand, Rose's fork stopped halfway to her mouth, and I saw how her fingers tightened a little. She said nothing, just lowered her head, and continued eating, but that silence was heavier than any word. I wanted to ask her what was bothering her, but I knew it was not the moment. After dinner, Vanessa insisted on washing the dishes, although I refused several times. "Robert, let me do it. You rest," she said with overflowing enthusiasm. I accepted reluctantly and watched her enter the kitchen, roll up her sleeves, and hum a cheerful melody while she cleaned. She did everything impeccably. The plates were organized, and the sink gleamed. For a moment I thought, this woman seems very attentive. But then when I went out to the living room, I saw Mikey sitting on the floor, coloring with his colored pencils. Vanessa approached and sat next to him. "How beautifully you draw, Mikey. What is it?" "Let me see," she said, reaching out her hand towards his drawing. But Mikey dropped the pencil immediately and leaned back with an expression of mistrust, as if she were a threat. Vanessa looked at me sideways and quickly forced a smile, as if to hide the awkward moment. "What a shy boy," she said with the same sweet voice. But I saw something strange flash in her eyes. David, meanwhile, did not seem to notice anything out of the ordinary. He was busy telling funny anecdotes from work and laughing out loud every time Vanessa made a joke. The introduction ended with my son completely satisfied, saying goodbye to Vanessa at the door, with his gaze fixed on her, as if there were no one else in the world. I stayed there watching them walk away, with a strange feeling in my heart, as if something was not quite right. Time passed, and Vanessa gradually became part of our lives. One morning, with the sun flooding the living room through the windows, I was reading the newspaper when Vanessa appeared, smiling from ear to ear. "Robert, today I want to take Mikey to the park. Is that okay with you?" she asked with a voice full of enthusiasm. I looked at Mikey, who was on the floor playing with his wooden blocks, with a blank expression. "Of course, I am sure he will love it," I replied, forcing a smile, although I felt a little doubt inside. David had gone to work, and I thought that maybe a little fresh air would do Mikey good. Vanessa took Mikey by the hand and led him towards the door, while I watched them leave with a strange heaviness in my heart. When they returned, Vanessa entered with a triumphant smile. He had so much fun, he wouldn't stop going on the slide and even asked for another vanilla ice cream, she recounted with a voice full of emotion. But when I looked at Mikey, I saw that his shirt was dirty with some spots of dried mud on the blue fabric that I had ironed that morning. He was quiet, gripping his toy car in his hand, without saying a word about his outing. "Did you have fun, buddy?" I asked him, crouching down to stroke his hair. He only nodded slightly, looking away. I wanted to ask him more, to know why he was so quiet, but Vanessa intervened with her always sweet voice. "I already told you, Robert. He loved it." I nodded, but inside me, a small piece of doubt began to form. On another occasion, while David was at work, Vanessa showed up by surprise. I was in the kitchen preparing lunch when I heard her talking to Mikey in the living room. At first, her voice was soft, but suddenly I heard a harsh phrase. "Be still, Mikey. Do not make a mess. You are already 6 years old, and you still behave like a baby." I stopped dead with the knife still on the tomato I was slicing, and a chill ran through my body. I came out of the kitchen, and instantly Vanessa changed her tone, becoming as sweet as if nothing had happened. "How smart our Mikey is. Look what a tall tower he built." She pointed to the wooden blocks with which the boy was playing with a radiant smile. But Mikey only pressed his lips together and looked at me as if asking for help. I tried to smile and said, "Yes, he is very skilled." But inside the unease began to grow like a thorn piercing my heart. I calmed myself down. She probably just isn't used to children. Anyone can be a little impatient at first. Mikey's 6th birthday is a memory I will never forget. Rose spent the whole morning baking a chocolate cake, Mikey's favorite. When she arrived with the cake and put it on the table with its candles lit, Mikey screamed with joy. His eyes shone for the first time in months. "Aunt Rose, this is my favorite cake," he exclaimed, running to hug her. She smiled, stroked his hair, and told him tenderly, "I made it especially for you, my love. Enjoy it." I watched them with a warm heart, feeling the family flame lighting up again. Vanessa was also there, but she only applauded in a forced way, standing in a corner with a lackluster smile. Her only gift for Mikey was an indifferent pat on the shoulder and a quick, "Happy birthday, kid." I saw how Mikey shrank a little, avoiding her gaze, and my heart ached again. I wanted to say something, but I remained silent, telling myself that I should not interfere too much. Another time, David took Vanessa and Mikey to the supermarket. I stayed home, but when they returned, I heard Vanessa complaining, with an irritated tone. Mikey knocked over a whole display of cereal boxes in the center aisle, and I had to help clean it up. What a clumsy boy! David frowned and turned to scold his son. "Mikey, you are already a big boy. You have to be more careful." I saw Mikey lower his head with his little hands clasped, and his look sought mine as if asking for help. I approached quickly and put a hand on his shoulder. "Do not worry, buddy. It was just some cereal boxes," I said, trying to comfort him. But inside, I could not stop wondering why Vanessa got angry so easily with a child. Why couldn't she be more patient and understanding like Grace was? One afternoon, when I went to pick Mikey up from school, his teacher pulled me aside and told me in a low but worried voice, "Robert, lately Mikey talks less and seems very withdrawn. Is something happening at home?" I froze, but tried to downplay it. "He is probably just adapting to the changes. Teacher, do not worry." But on the way home, Mikey pulled on my sleeve and told me with a trembling voice, "Grandpa, I do not want to go home if Miss Vanessa is there." I stopped and crouched down to look into his transparent eyes, feeling my heart break. "Why do you say that, my love? Miss Vanessa cares about you," I told him, although as soon as I said it, I knew I was wrong. Mikey shook his head with firm determination in his gaze. "No, Grandpa, she does not love me." I stroked his hair, trying to calm him, but inside I could not deny that the boy was telling the truth. Rose, who was nearby picking us up, had heard everything. She turned around in silence, but I saw how her shoulders tensed, as if holding back her anger. All those loose pieces, all those little signs. I had seen them, but I had chosen to ignore them, and so the day of my son's wedding arrived. That afternoon the golden sun filtered through the large windows of the estate, bathing the hall with resplendent light, as if wanting to celebrate my son's happy day. I was sitting at table number 8, next to my grandson Mikey and Rose. Mikey was playing with his red car, making soft vroom vroom sounds. I looked at him and my heart filled with tenderness. Rose, wearing a simple beige dress, was sitting on the other side, leaning in from time to time to whisper something in Mikey's ear with a smile as sweet as the morning sun. "My love, try another little piece of bread," she told him, breaking off a small piece of the roll. I smiled, seeing them, feeling a bit of comfort in my heart. Although our family had gone through so much pain, the presence of Rose and Mikey was always the warmth that soothed my soul. David, my son, dressed in an elegant navy blue suit, walked among the tables, toasting with relatives. His face overflowed with happiness. His radiant smile seemed to want to erase the dark years that followed Grace's death. I looked at him, feeling a mixture of pride and sadness. I wanted to believe that he had found new happiness, that Vanessa, the dazzling bride in her wedding dress embroidered with beads, would give him a new home. But every time my gaze crossed with Vanessa's, who was laughing out loud in front of the cameras, without letting go of her glass of wine, I felt a small thorn piercing my heart. Her smile was too perfect, like a carefully placed mask. The soft melody of the band played, mingling with the animated conversations of the guests. The waiters moved with discretion, serving appetizers, tortilla soup, and elegantly presented main courses. I noticed that Mikey only took a small piece of bread, and then carefully pushed his plate away. I frowned and asked him in a low voice, "Do you not like this, buddy?" The boy shook his head, looking away as if hiding something. I wanted to ask him more, but a relative interrupted, saying cheerfully, "Mikey is behaving so well. Robert, he has grown so much." I smiled and replied, "He is becoming quite the little man." But inside I could not help worrying. Mikey had never rejected food in such a strange way. In the distance I saw that Vanessa's gaze was directed towards our table. The smile on her lips seemed to tighten for a second, just enough for no one to notice before turning around to continue toasting with another guest. I tried to dismiss my unease, telling myself that I was overthinking. But then everything changed in an instant. Mikey continued playing with his car. He pushed it with too much force, and the toy rolled onto the floor. The boy quickly bent down to pick it up, but I saw him freeze, with his eyes wide open, fixed on something under the table. I leaned in to ask him what was wrong when Mikey pulled out a small piece of paper folded in 4 with trembling hands and a pale face. Immediately he clung to my hand and whispered urgently, "Grandpa, let's go. Please, let's go now." My heart began to beat fast, as if it wanted to jump out of my chest. "What is wrong, buddy?" I asked, trying to stay calm. But Mikey's look of panic made it difficult. Trembling, he repeated that question that froze my blood. "You haven't looked under the table, have you?" His words were like a cold knife that paralyzed me. I crouched down, lifted the white tablecloth, and my eyes scanned the dark space under the table. The little paper was lying next to Mikey's chair, a harmless-looking object, but potentially deadly. I picked it up with trembling hands, feeling the world shrinking around me, leaving only Mikey, me, and that damn paper. I unfolded it. The candlelight was enough to read the scribbled words. Table 8. Special guest, boy. Add extra crushed peanuts to the dessert. A few words, but they were like an electric shock that ran through my entire body. Unconsciously, I crumpled the paper in my hand. The music, the laughter, everything around me seemed to sink into an abyss from which I could not escape. Vanessa, with her dazzling wedding dress, continued laughing in a corner of the hall, raising her glass to toast with a guest, as if nothing in the world could worry her. David was busy taking photos with his colleagues, a radiant smile confirming that this was the happiest day of his life. But for me, everything in that hall was a farce, a curtain hiding the terrible truth I had just discovered. I squeezed the paper tight, feeling it burn my skin. Mikey, the grandson I love more than my own life, had been about to become the victim of an evil plan, right on his father's wedding day. I turned to Rose, who was sitting next to Mikey. Her eyes were full of concern seeing my expression. "Take care of Mikey, please," I told her, trying to keep calm, although I knew I could not hide the tremor in my voice. Rose nodded, pulling Mikey towards her and hugging him protectively. "Where are you going?" she asked me in a low voice, but full of concern. I just shook my head without answering, because I didn't even know what I was going to do next. I walked quickly into the hallway with heavy legs, as if they were carrying lead, but with my heart beating wildly, urging me to act. Near the bar, I saw a group of waiters chatting. Their laughter sounded like a painful contrast to the storm that was unleashing inside me. I recognized Jason, the young man who had brought food to our table several times. He had a kind face and a friendly smile, but at that moment I had no patience for pleasantries. I approached him directly, put the paper in his face, and asked him with a firm voice, "Do you know who gave you this note?" Jason looked at the paper, and his face changed instantly. His carefree smile turned into an expression of panic. "Sir, is that the paper from my notepad?" he stammered with trembling hands, as if wanting to snatch it from me. "A woman gave it to me and told me to pass it to the kitchen. It fell out of my vest pocket when I leaned over to serve the table." His words were like a ray of light in the middle of the darkness, but they also disturbed me even more. "Who gave it to you?" I insisted, almost shouting, completely losing my cool. Jason stepped back, confused. "I do not know her name, sir. She just told me to give it to the chef. The note did not say who it was from." The rage exploded inside me like a fire consuming all reason. I leaned closer, with my voice trembling with anger and fear. "Do you know? My grandson is severely allergic to peanuts. A single trace could kill him." Jason went pale with his eyes wide with horror and shook his head frantically. "Sir, I really did not know. I just passed the note. I had no idea about any allergy." His voice broke as if he too were trapped in this nightmare. The other waiters began to murmur among themselves, looking at each other with curiosity and concern. I squeezed the paper in my hand, feeling it burn my skin. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break everything, but I knew I could not let emotions dominate me. Mikey was waiting for me, and I had to protect him. From inside the hall, the master of ceremonies announced cheerfully that dessert would be served soon. His voice was like a cruel reminder that time was running out, and if I hesitated, a deadly trap could be waiting for Mikey. I took a deep breath, trying to control the tremors in my body. I knew I could not stay silent. If I did not act right now, I would never forgive myself. I returned to the hall with the paper still in my hand, like irrefutable proof of a sinister plan. The hall continued to be flooded by candlelight, and the music of the band mixed with the laughter of the guests. The waiters silently began to bring dessert to the tables, and the aroma of cake filled the air. But for me, It was all a farce. I looked at Mikey, huddled next to Rose, his transparent brown eyes full of fear fixed on me, as if I were his only refuge in the middle of the storm. I took Mikey's little hand, feeling his little fingers tremble in my palm, and then, as if driven by an invisible force, I stood up suddenly. My voice resonated clear and firm over the music and conversations. "One moment, please. Before dessert is served, I have something to say." The whole hall fell silent, as if time had stopped. All eyes were fixed on table 8, where I was standing with Mikey by my side, and Rose sitting with a spark of determination in her eyes. The clinking of glasses ceased, the murmurs faded, and only the beating of my heart could be heard in my chest. I held up the paper. The words scribbled on it were an undeniable accusation. Who wrote this note asking for extra crushed peanuts to be added to the boys' dessert at table 8? I asked with my voice trembling with indignation, but struggling to keep it clear and firm. Whispers began to ripple through the hall, like small waves on a calm lake. Some guests looked at each other, shaking their heads with looks of curiosity and confusion. I felt Mikey's gaze fixed on me, as if begging me to do something to protect him. David ran from another table with a smile on his face, which quickly turned into concern seeing my expression. "Dad, what is happening?" he asked, completely bewildered. I did not answer immediately. I just put the paper on the table and pushed it towards him. "Read it yourself," I told him with a harsh voice, although inside I was crumbling. David took the paper, his eyes scanned the words, and I saw his face turn pale and his hands shake slightly. "What does this mean?" he asked, stunned, looking at me and then at Mikey, as if looking for a logical explanation. Vanessa, in her dazzling wedding dress, approached, frowning with surprise. "Perfectly acted. What is all this? Some bad joke?" she said with a soft voice, but I noticed a flash of panic in her eyes. I looked her straight in the eye, my heart constricted by rage and fear. "My grandson is severely allergic to peanuts," I said, with my voice trembling with indignation. "This is not a joke. This is attempted murder." My words fell like thunder, plunging the hall into a sepulchral silence. Some guests opened their mouths in astonishment, while others began to whisper, their gazes moving from me to Vanessa. Vanessa let out a forced laugh, a mask to maintain composure. "Excuse me, Robert, but there is no name on the paper. Are you going to believe a story invented by a child who found a random note?" she said with a mocking tone, trying to make me look like a paranoid old man. Some guests began to comment with doubt. "Maybe it is a misunderstanding. Who would do something like that at a wedding?" The blood boiled in my veins. Vanessa's audacity left me almost speechless. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip off that wedding dress to reveal the truth. But I knew I had to keep calm for Mikey, for my family. Suddenly Rose stood up, hugging Mikey protectively, with teary eyes fixed on Vanessa. "Enough, Vanessa!" Her voice sounded cold but full of pain. Unable to hold back any more, Rose approached Vanessa and gave her a hard slap. The sound resonated throughout the hall. The sharp, resounding noise broke the silence and shattered the facade. Everyone was stunned, including me. Vanessa put her hand on her cheek, with eyes wide open with surprise, and then turned to David sobbing. "Do you see? She is crazy with jealousy, and that is why she attacks me. What have I done to deserve this?" Rose did not back down, her fists clenched and voice broken by rage. "The only bad one here is you. You wanted to hurt an innocent child at your own wedding." Her words were like a knife that cut the heavy air of the hall. Doubtful looks began to focus on Vanessa, and I saw her remain paralyzed, her fake smile fading. David was motionless, his gaze going from me to Rose and Vanessa, as if trapped between two worlds. "Rose, calm down," he said with a trembling voice. But I knew he was no longer sure who to believe. The murmurs of the guests grew like a tide, dragging all eyes towards me, towards Vanessa, and towards Mikey, my little grandson who was trembling in Rose's arms. Vanessa tried to maintain her fake calm, but I saw her hands shaking when she spoke. "This is slander. Someone probably put that paper there to ruin our wedding." Her voice was sharp, but I noticed the panic in her look, as if her perfect mask was beginning to crack. I could not stand her audacity any more. The anger inside me exploded like a fire, consuming all my patience. I hit the table hard, making the glasses shake. "Enough!" I shouted with a voice so cold that it silenced even the band's music. "Jason, come here." The young waiter. Jason approached from a corner with a face pale with fear. His eyes moved from side to side, as if he were trapped between the truth and the approaching storm. I showed him the paper with a trembling but firm voice. "Confirm it. Is this the note you received?" Jason nodded repeatedly, stammering. "Yes, sir. That is the one. A woman gave it to me and told me to give it to the kitchen staff. It fell out of my vest pocket when I leaned over to serve the table." He lowered his head as if wanting to avoid my gaze. I felt my blood boiling, but I forced myself to stay calm, because I knew everyone in the hall was watching. Vanessa hurried to interrupt with a sharp, almost desperate voice. "He's wrong. I know nothing about that note." But before she could answer, a weak but pain-filled voice was heard from behind. Melissa, Vanessa's younger sister, burst into tears and stood up from her chair at the family table. "It was Vanessa who gave me that note," said the young woman, trembling as tears ran down her cheeks. "She asked me to give it to the waiter. I swear I did not know what it said. She told me it was a special dessert request." A murmur of astonishment ran through the hall. "My God, I cannot believe it. How is it possible?" I looked at Melissa and my heart softened. She was barely 20 years old. Her eyes were red and full of confusion, as if she too were trapped in this nightmare. Vanessa turned abruptly and yelled at her sister with her face distorted by anger. "Shut up, Melissa! How dare you invent lies to harm your own sister?" Her voice was cutting, but I saw her lips trembling as if she were struggling to hide the truth. Melissa stepped back, trembling from head to toe, and said between sobs, "I'm not lying, Vanessa. I only did what you asked me. You know, Mikey is allergic to peanuts. You have mentioned it before." Her words were like a dagger that pierced Vanessa's falsehood, leaving the whole hall in shock. An elderly relative at our table shook his head with a broken voice. "How is it possible to try to hurt an innocent child?" Rose stepped forward, still holding Mikey protectively, and said with an icy voice, "If you continue to deny it, we can ask the venue to check their security cameras. Everything will be cleared up in a moment." Her words were like a stone thrown into a lake, causing waves of panic. Vanessa's face turned ashen, her lips tightened, and her gaze desperately sought an escape. But there was no escape anymore, and that silence for me was the clearest confession of all. David remained paralyzed, with a trembling hand on Mikey's shoulder, looking with horror at the woman he had just called his wife. His voice broke, as if trying to cling to the hope that it was all a misunderstanding. But his look, passing from the paper to Mikey, said it all. I saw his heart break, just as mine had broken upon discovering the plan. An uncle stood up and shook his head, disgusted. "It is incredible! So much evil on a day of celebration!" His voice trembled with indignation. After Rose's challenge about the security cameras, a deadly silence took over the hall. Vanessa, the woman I once tried to accept as part of my family, stood there with a pale face and tight lips, looking for one last excuse. But the truth was exposed, and she had nowhere to run. David, my son, walked slowly towards her with a tense face and red eyes, and asked her, "Vanessa, tell me the truth. Is this true?" His voice trembled as if begging for a hint of hope that it was all just a terrible misunderstanding, but I knew that, deep down, he also felt the painful truth. Vanessa stepped back, trying to force a crooked smile, but her eyes betrayed her panic. "You do not believe me," she said with a broken voice, as if trying to cling to the last drop of David's trust. "This is all a plan of theirs. I did not do anything." But her words sounded weak, like a flame about to go out before a storm. I looked at her with my heart heavy with indignation and pain. This woman who I thought would bring happiness to my son was now in front of me like a stranger, a danger I had not seen clearly before. Rose put her hand on David's shoulder and said with a voice contained to the maximum, "Mikey could have died because of this woman." Her words were as sharp as a razor. Vanessa screamed desperately, "Shut up! You're just jealous. You have always wanted David for yourself, Rose." But Rose did not flinch. She trembled with rage, but stood firm like a shield for Mikey. "Do you dare call me jealous?" Rose replied with an icy voice. "Look into this child's eyes and tell me you did not try to hurt him." Mikey clung to me, his little hands squeezing mine as if he feared being dragged deeper into that nightmare. The guests began to stand up. The party atmosphere had been completely shattered. A relative of our family hit the table with rage. "This is shameful. We cannot let this go unpunished." Murmurs of support were heard, like waves that grew and drowned Vanessa in the condemning looks of everyone. David, trapped between the truth and his broken heart, shouted with a voice broken by pain and indignation, "Mikey is my son. You tried to kill my son at our own wedding." His words were like a direct stab to Vanessa's heart, and I saw her crumble in tears. But those tears I knew were not of repentance, but of having been exposed. I put the paper on the table and declared with a firm voice, "Whoever tries to hurt my grandson will never have the right to set foot in this family." My words resonated clear and inflexible like a sentence. Vanessa looked up with eyes full of fire, but I saw defeat in her gaze. She had lost, not only against me, but against the truth. The venue's security staff approached, and politely but firmly asked Vanessa to leave the hall. "Ma'am, please come with us," one of them said with a professional tone. Vanessa stepped back, looking for help with her gaze, but no one took her side. Many guests shook their heads, leaving their drinks half-finished and sighing with disbelief. "Unbelievable," one whispered. "How can someone be so cruel?" said another, horrified. David remained motionless with his hands on his head, as if trying to stop his world from collapsing. Then, as if he no longer had the strength to hold himself up, he slowly knelt in front of Mikey with a choked voice. "Son, forgive me. Forgive me, buddy, for not protecting you better." I saw tears run down his cheeks and felt my heart break in two. I helped David up by squeezing his shoulders and told him with a grave but firm voice, "Fortunately, we stopped this in time. This false happiness has to end here and now." I watched Vanessa being escorted out amidst looks of contempt, and in my heart I knew she was never and would never be part of this family. The days that followed that wedding nightmare, my family was wrapped in a silent whirlwind, where wounds were still bleeding and unanswered questions floated in the air. I felt as if I had just woken up from a nightmare in which I almost lost Mikey, my grandson, whom I love more than my own life. The story of the failed wedding spread throughout our community. The house phone would not stop ringing. Some blamed David for having trusted Vanessa blindly. Others pitied Mikey, the innocent child who was about to be the victim of an evil plan. But for me, every call was just a painful reminder of what we had lived through. David locked himself away after what happened. He was no longer the radiant man in the navy blue suit from the wedding day. Instead, he took Mikey to and from school in silence every day, with his gaze loaded with pain and guilt. Vanessa's name was never mentioned again in the house. I looked at him with an aching heart, but I knew he needed time to heal, to find himself after having been betrayed by the person he had trusted with his heart. I did not blame him because I understand that love can blind anyone, but I also knew that our family had to rise from the ashes. I continued taking care of Mikey, as I had done since Grace passed away. I cooked his favorite dishes, like pancakes with maple syrup or warm rice pudding, trying to give him back the feeling of safety. But the one who really helped heal Mikey's soul was Rose. Every morning she carefully prepared his lunch for school, making sure there were no peanuts or any allergen that could harm him. She even wrote a small note for his teacher, explaining Mikey's allergy, again along with a happy face, drawn with a colored pencil that made him smile. "Aunt Rose, I love your drawings," Mikey exclaimed, opening his lunchbox, and I saw his eyes light up as if a part of his innocence had returned. Every afternoon, Rose took Mikey to the nearby park. I used to watch them from afar, seeing how she taught him to fly a kite, showing him how to hold the string so it would fly high. Once Mikey fell off the slide and Rose ran to him, picked him up, dusted off his clothes, and whispered, "You're okay, my love. I am here." Mikey's clear laughter resonated, a sound I thought I had lost forever, and which now was like a balm for my heart. I looked at Rose with infinite gratitude, because she was not only a sister to David, but also like a second mother to Mikey, filling the void Grace had left. One night, when Mikey had a high fever, I saw Rose spend the night awake by his side. She sat in a chair next to the bed, putting damp cloths on his forehead, while she told him in a low voice the story of a brave little bird that flew through a storm. I stayed at the door, watching in silence, and I realized that David's gaze followed Rose for a long while. It was a complex look full of gratitude and new understanding, as if he were seeing something that had been in front of him all along. I said nothing. I simply withdrew in silence, giving him space. But in my heart, I began to have hope that maybe there was a light at the end of our family's dark tunnel. One night, during one of the rare dinners when we were all together, sitting around the table, with the hot stew I had prepared, Mikey suddenly looked up with his transparent eyes, fixed on Rose. "I want Aunt Rose to be my new mom," he said with a soft voice, but clear, as if it were something he had been thinking about for a long time. Everyone at the table fell silent. Rose blushed and lowered her head, grabbing the spoon as if to hide her embarrassment. David remained paralyzed with cloudy eyes, as if Mikey's words had touched a very deep fiber in his heart. I smiled. I put my hand on David's shoulder and told him with a warm voice, "True happiness, son, does not come from a dazzling wedding dress, but from a sincere heart that knows how to love." David looked at me, then looked at Rose, and I saw a small spark of hope shine in his eyes. Time passed, and Vanessa disappeared completely from our lives, like a toxic wind that had blown over. Mikey became a happy child again, always attached to Rose with his red car and the drawings he made for her. I watched him run and play in the yard, feeling great relief, but also a stab of pain, thinking about everything he had had to go through. One day, David took Rose's hand. He stood in front of me in the living room and said with a trembling but firm voice, "Dad, I know I was wrong. I was blind. I put Mikey in danger. But this time I do not want to let go of the person who has really been by our family's side all along." Rose lowered her head with flushed cheeks, but I saw a radiant smile on her lips. I nodded while tears silently rolled down my cheeks. "Son, all I want is for you and Mikey to be happy," I told him with a broken voice. That night, after Mikey fell asleep, I sat by the window, watching the silver moon stretching over the quiet street. Its soft light was like a reminder that, although our family had gone through dark days, the light always finds a way to break through. I whispered to myself, family is not always made of blood ties. Sometimes it is chosen with love and courage. After that dark wedding, a new chapter had really begun, full of light for my family. I looked towards the yard where the kite that Rose and Mikey had flown the day before was still lying, and I knew that although the old wounds might never heal completely, we would move forward together, with love and strength as our support. After going through all this, I understood something very important. In life, there are losses that cannot be replaced, betrayals that break the heart, but sincere love will always be the light that illuminates the path. Family is not only built with blood ties, but also with choices, with the courage to protect each other from darkness and danger. It is sacrifice and true affection that brings lasting happiness, not false appearances. I want everyone to remember that we must listen to our instincts when it comes to protecting those we love. We must let the heart guide us, because sometimes a small act of attention can save a life, and it is kindness that takes us out of nights that seem to have no end. The story you have just heard has been modified in names and places to protect the identity of the people involved. I do not tell this to judge, but with the hope that someone listens and stops to reflect. How many families are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I wonder, if you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have chosen silence to keep the peace, or would you have dared to face everything to protect your family? I would like to know your opinion, because every story can become a light that illuminates the path of others. The following months were of silent reconstruction. Every morning, when the sun peeked through the windows of the house, I prepared breakfast while listening to Mikey's laughter playing in his room. That sound, which had disappeared for so long, now filled every corner of our home like celestial music. David had returned to being the father Mikey needed. I saw him sit on the floor with his son, building towers with wooden blocks, reading him stories before sleeping, taking him to the park on Sundays. It was as if he had woken up from a long and painful dream, and now he was making up for lost time. One Saturday afternoon, while I was watering the bougainvillea plants in the garden, I saw David and Rose sitting on the porch. They spoke in low voices, but I could see the tenderness in their looks. Rose showed David an album of old photos from when Grace was still alive, from when Mikey was just a baby. "Look at this one," Rose said, pointing to an image where Grace carried a newborn Mikey. "Grace always said Mikey had your eyes." David smiled with nostalgia, but it was no longer a sad smile. It was a smile of acceptance, of peace with the past. I approached with 2 cups of coffee and offered them to them. "Thanks, Dad," said David, taking the cup. His eyes looked at me with gratitude. "For everything you have done for us." I just nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. "That is what fathers do, son, protect their own." Rose got up to help me with the plants. While she pruned the dry leaves of the geraniums, she told me in a low voice, "Robert, I never thought things would end like this. I always loved David as a brother, but now—" Her voice broke, and she did not finish the sentence. I looked at her with compassionate eyes. "Rose, you have been the pillar of this family when we were all falling. There is nothing wrong with loving and being loved." She looked at me with damp eyes and nodded. "But what about Mikey? Won't it be confusing for him?" I smiled and pointed to where Mikey was playing with his car in the yard. "That boy loves you, Rose. For him, you are already his mom. Love does not confuse. Love heals." Rose wiped her tears and smiled. "Thank you, Robert. Your words mean a lot to me." Weeks passed, and the transformation in our family was evident. David began to arrive earlier from work. He no longer locked himself in his office until late at night. Now he had dinner with us, helped Mikey with his homework, and on weekends organized family outings. One Sunday morning, David announced that we were all going to the lake. Mikey jumped with excitement. "Really, Dad? Are we going to the lake?" David picked him up and spun him in the air. "Really, champion? And Aunt Rose is coming too." We prepared ham sandwiches, a cooler with sodas and iced tea, and got into David's car. The trip was full of songs. Rose taught Mikey the lyrics to "You Are My Sunshine," while David and I sang from the front. It was as if the years of pain had dissolved, replaced by this simple and genuine joy. When we arrived at the lake, the water shone under the sun like thousands of diamonds. Mikey ran towards the shore with his bucket and shovel, screaming with excitement. Rose ran after him, making sure he didn't get too close to the water. David and I sat on a bench under a large tree, watching them. "Dad," David said after a long silence, "I want to ask for your blessing." I looked at him, knowing exactly what he wanted to talk about. "For Rose?" I asked. He nodded, with his eyes fixed on Rose, who was now building a sandcastle with Mikey. "I know she is my sister, and I know people might talk, but Dad, she has been here all along, when I was lost in my pain. When Mikey needed me and I wasn't present, Rose was there. Not as a sister, but as something more. His voice trembled with emotion. I put my hand on his shoulder. Son, Rose is not your blood sister. She is your sister because her parents adopted her when she was just a baby. There is no impediment, neither moral nor legal. And if you ask me, I don't know anyone better for you and for Mikey than Rose. David looked at me with bright eyes. Do you really mean it, Dad? I nodded firmly. Really, son, Rose loves Mikey as if he were hers, and she loves you with a love that has waited patiently for years. Do not let happiness escape you again. David got up and walked towards Rose and Mikey. I saw him kneel in the sand next to them, take Rose's hand, and tell her something I couldn't hear from where I was. But I saw how Rose's eyes opened with surprise, how tears began to roll down her cheeks, and how she finally nodded, hugging him tight. Mikey, without completely understanding what was happening, jumped with joy. Is Aunt Rose going to be my mom? Really? He shouted, hugging both of them. My heart filled with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. I got up and walked towards them, joining the family hug. That night, back home, Mikey fell asleep in the back seat, hugging his red car. Rose was in front with David, their hands intertwined over the gear stick. I watched them from the rearview mirror and smiled. The family I thought was broken forever was now rebuilding itself in a way I never imagined. Preparations for the new wedding began, but this time it was different. There was no ostentation or display, only close family and true friends. The ceremony would be in our backyard, under the same tree where Grace used to hang the swing for Mikey. Rose insisted she wanted something simple. Robert, I do not need a fancy dress or a big hall. I just want to be surrounded by the people I love. I smiled at her and said, Rose, you deserve everything beautiful in the world. But I understand this wedding is not about impressing anyone. It is about celebrating true love. Mikey was excited. Every day he asked how many days were left for the wedding. Grandpa, am I going to have a mom again? He asked me one night while I was tucking him in. Yes, my love, and she is going to be the best mom you can imagine. He smiled and hugged his pillow. I already know, Grandpa. Aunt Rose has always been like my mom. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and beautiful. The sky was a deep blue, without a single cloud. The yard was decorated with pots of geraniums and white roses. We had placed wooden chairs under the tree, and a small arch decorated with white and purple ribbons marked the place where the ceremony would take place. David was nervous, adjusting his tie over and over again. Dad, do I look okay? He asked me. I looked at him with pride. You look like a man who finally found his way, son. He smiled and took a deep breath. When Rose appeared, everyone held their breath. She was not wearing an elaborate wedding dress. It was a simple ivory dress with traditional embroidery on the chest and sleeves. Her hair was gathered with natural flowers, and her smile was radiant, genuine, unpretentious. Mikey ran by her side, dressed in his small suit, carrying the rings on a small satin cushion. Look at my mom. She is the prettiest, he shouted with childish pride. We all laughed, and some wiped away tears of emotion. The ceremony was short, but deeply emotional. Father Martin, our lifelong parish priest, officiated the union. David and Rose, he said with a solemn voice, you have passed through fire and have come out stronger. May this marriage be the beginning of a new life, built on true love and faith. When David and Rose exchanged vows, tears ran freely down the cheeks of those present. I promise to love and take care of you, said David with a trembling voice. I promise to be the father Mikey needs and the husband you deserve. Rose replied with a clear voice, I promise to love Mikey as my own son and accompany you every step of the way. When they kissed, everyone applauded. Mikey ran to hug them, shouting, Now I really have a mom. My heart overflowed with happiness. I wiped my tears discreetly, but I was not ashamed to cry. They were tears of joy, of relief, of gratitude. The celebration after the ceremony was full of life. We had prepared abundant food, chili, roast pork, tamales with cheese, rice, and fried beans. The guests ate and chatted animatedly, sharing stories and laughter. A small band I had hired played traditional songs, and some guests were encouraged to dance in the yard. Mikey did not separate from Rose. He followed her everywhere, proudly introducing her to every person. "She is my new mom," he said with a smile that lit up his whole face. Rose hugged him, gave him kisses on the forehead, and whispered loving words that only he could hear. I saw David watching them from afar, with an expression of peace I hadn't seen on his face in years. He approached me and put his arm around my shoulders. "Thanks, Dad, for never giving up on us, for protecting Mikey when I couldn't, for helping me find the way back." I hugged him tight, feeling my chest fill with emotion. "Son, that is what families do. We take care of each other, we protect each other, and when one falls, the others pick him up." David nodded with tears in his eyes. "Now I understand what it really means to be a father. It is not just about providing, it is about being present, listening, seeing the signs." "That is right," I told him, "and never forget that a child's intuition is pure. When Mikey told you something was wrong with Vanessa, he knew it. Children feel things that we adults sometimes ignore, for convenience or hope." David looked towards where Mikey was playing with other children, running between the chairs with his red car. "I am never going to ignore his fears or worries again. I am never going to put my happiness above his safety again." I squeezed his shoulder. "That is all I need to hear, son." Night fell softly over our celebration. The colored lights we had hung in the yard turned on, creating a magical atmosphere. The children chased fireflies, while the adults enjoyed coffee and sweet bread. Rose cut a simple but beautiful cake, decorated with edible flowers, and we all toasted with fruit punch. "To family," said one of our neighbors, raising his glass. "To true love," added another. "To new beginnings," I said, looking at David, Rose, and Mikey. Everyone clinked their glasses and drank, sealing that moment of collective happiness. When the guests began to say goodbye, each one approached to hug the new couple and wish them the best. Aunt Martha, a distant cousin, took my hand and told me, "Robert, you saved that boy. God bless you for your courage." I smiled at her. It wasn't just me. It was Rose who had the courage to confront the truth. It was Mikey who had the instinct to recognize danger. It was the whole family. Weeks turned into months, and life in our house found a beautiful and peaceful rhythm. Every morning I woke up to the smell of the coffee Rose prepared, and Mikey's laughter playing before going to school. David left early for work, but always returned in time to have dinner with us. Family dinners became sacred. We sat around the table, sharing not only food, but also stories of the day. Mikey talked about his friends at school, about what he had learned, about the drawings he had made. Rose talked about her plans to remodel the garden, about the new recipes she wanted to try. David shared anecdotes from work, but always ended up saying, "But the best part of the day is coming back here with you guys." One afternoon, while I was watering the plants, Mikey came running. "Grandpa, look what I drew at school." He showed me a drawing on colored paper. It was our family, him in the center, holding hands with David on one side and Rose on the other. I was behind them, with my arms outstretched as if protecting them all. "It is beautiful, buddy," I told him, feeling a lump in my throat. "And who are we all?" He pointed to each figure. "This is you, Grandpa. This is my dad. This is my mom, Rose. And this is me. We are a happy family." I hugged him tight, feeling tears wanting to come out. Yes, my love, we are a happy family. I hung that drawing on the refrigerator where it would remain for years, a constant reminder that after the storm, calm always comes. After pain, healing always comes. After darkness, light always comes. Sundays became special days. After Mass at St. Michael's Parish, we all went together to the market to buy fresh vegetables, fruits, and sometimes a treat. Mikey went hand in hand with Rose, pointing out everything that caught his attention. "Mom, look at those peaches. Can we buy some?" Rose smiled and bought everything Mikey asked for, within reason. Then we returned home, and we all helped prepare Sunday lunch. David peeled potatoes, Rose made the sauce, I supervised the stew, and Mikey set the table carefully, making sure every fork was in its place. It was a simple ritual, but full of meaning. It was family in its purest form. One night, several months after the wedding, Rose looked for me in the garden where I used to sit and watch the stars. She sat next to me on the wooden bench under the tree. "Robert," she began with a soft voice, "I want to thank you." "Thank me? For what?" I asked. She took my hand. "For giving me the opportunity to be part of this family. For not judging me when I felt something more for David being his adopted sister. For defending me at the wedding when no one believed me. For treating me like a daughter." I looked at her with eyes full of affection. "Rose, you have always been like a daughter to me. Since you were little and came to play with David, I saw you grow. I saw you become a beautiful and compassionate woman. And when I saw how you took care of Mikey after we lost Grace, I knew you were an angel that God had put on our path." She began to cry silently. "I have something to tell you," she whispered. "I'm expecting a baby." My heart stopped for a second and then began to beat strongly. "Really?" I asked, almost breathless. She nodded, smiling through tears. 2 months. I haven't told David yet. I wanted you to be the first to know." I hugged her tight, feeling that my joy was so great it didn't fit in my chest. "Rose, this is the best news. Mikey is going to have a little brother or sister. The family keeps growing." She wiped her tears. "I am a little scared. What if I am not a good mother? What if I make mistakes?" I took her hands. "Rose, look at everything you have done for Mikey. That boy adores you. You are the best mother he could have, and you will be just as wonderful with this new baby. We all make mistakes, but the important thing is love, and you have plenty of love to give." That night when David came home, Rose gave him the news. I saw it from the living room, watching how my son's face transformed from surprise to absolute joy. He lifted her in his arms and spun her around, laughing and crying at the same time. "Really? Are we going to have a baby?" he repeated over and over again. Rose felt radiant. Mikey came running in, intrigued by all the commotion. "What is happening? Why are you happy?" David picked him up and told him, "Mikey, are you going to be a big brother? Mom Rose is expecting a baby?" Mikey's eyes opened huge. "A baby? To play with me?" We all laughed. "Yes, my love," said Rose. "A little brother or sister for you." Mikey shouted with excitement and hugged Rose. "I am going to be the best big brother in the world. I am going to teach him to play with cars and to draw and to fly kites." My heart filled to the brim. This family that had been on the verge of destruction was now flourishing in ways I never imagined. The following months were of preparation and anticipation. Rose and David arranged the guest room to turn it into a nursery. They painted the walls a soft yellow and hung mobiles of stuffed animals. Mikey insisted on putting some of his favorite toys in the room. "So the baby doesn't feel lonely," he explained. I knitted a sky-blue blanket, not knowing yet if it would be a boy or a girl, but wanting this baby to know from before birth that he or she was loved. Every stitch was a prayer. Every turn of yarn was a wish for protection and happiness. One cold January dawn, Rose felt contractions. David took her quickly to the hospital while I stayed with Mikey. "Grandpa, is my mom going to be okay?" he asked with concern. "Of course, my love, and soon you are going to meet your little brother or sister." Hours later, David called. His voice was broken with emotion. "Dad, it is a girl, a beautiful and perfect girl. Her name is Gracie, like Mikey's mom." I felt tears running down my face. "Grace," I whispered. "A perfect name." When we went to the hospital to meet her, Mikey carried a drawing he had made for his sister. It was a big yellow sun with the word "Welcome" written in uneven letters. Rose was in bed, pale but radiant, holding little Gracie wrapped in a pink blanket. "Come, Mikey," Rose called softly. "Come meet your sister." Mikey approached with careful steps, as if afraid to make noise. He looked at the baby with wondrous eyes. "She is so tiny," he whispered. "Can I touch her?" Rose guided his little hand to stroke Gracie's cheek. The baby moved slightly, and Mikey smiled, a smile so pure and full of love that reminded me why all the pain and struggle had been worth it. "Hi, little sister," said Mikey. "I am your big brother, and I am going to take care of you always." David looked at me from the other side of the bed, his eyes shining with tears of happiness. Without words, we understood each other. We had come so far. We had survived loss, betrayal, pain, and now here we were, witnesses of a new life, of a new hope. I held little Gracie in my arms, feeling her light but significant weight. "Welcome to the family, little one," I whispered to her. "You have a brother who adores you, parents who love you, and a grandpa who's going to take care of you with all his heart." Returning to the present, sitting here telling you this story, I realize how much we have grown as a family. Mikey is now 10 years old and is the most loving and protective big brother. Gracie is 2 years old and already follows her brother everywhere. David and Rose are the parents they were always meant to be, united by true love and mutual respect. And I, Robert, at almost 70 years old, have learned that true family does not always come from where we expect. Sometimes the people we think are the right ones turn out to be dangerous, and the people who are always there, waiting patiently, turn out to be the blessing we needed. I believe that courage is not always big and loud. Sometimes courage is listening to a child when he says something is wrong. It is confronting uncomfortable truths. It is choosing to protect the vulnerable even when it is difficult. If you are watching this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel William's Revenge Stories, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I want to know how far our message of protection and family love has reached. I want you to remember something important. If you ever feel that something is not right, especially when it comes to children, trust your instinct. Do not ignore the signs. Do not sacrifice safety to keep the peace or avoid conflict. Children depend on us adults to protect them, and that is a sacred responsibility that we cannot take lightly. I also want to tell you that if you are going through a loss, if you have lost someone you love, life can be beautiful again. Not in the same way, but beautiful. The love we lost is never replaced, but the heart has an infinite capacity to love again, in different but equally deep ways. And if you are like Rose, someone who has loved in silence, waiting patiently, have faith. True love always finds its way. Do not settle for less than you deserve. Do not be afraid to defend what is right, even when everyone else doubts you. The story I have just shared with you is real. Names in some places have been changed to protect my family's privacy, but every word of pain, fear, and finally joy is true. I wonder now to you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have had the courage to stand up in the middle of a wedding, to accuse the bride of trying to murder your grandson? Or would you have kept silent for fear of ruining the day? I would like to hear your thoughts in the comments. Remember always, the greatest expression of love is sometimes the courage to defend those who cannot defend themselves alone. Family is built with love, strengthened with truth, and protected with courage. Thank you for listening to my story. May God bless your family, as He has blessed mine. And never, never underestimate the power of paying attention, of listening, of acting when something in your heart tells you something is wrong. Until next time, this is Robert, reminding you that true love always triumphs over evil, and that a united family can overcome any storm. May peace and love fill your home as they have filled